Viktor Frankl was born the 26th of March 1905, and he was an Austrian Jew, and he was a psychiatrist and a neurologist. And Viktor Frankl is most famous for his book, Man's Search for Meaning. The book is based upon Viktor Frankl's observations of life in various Nazi concentration camps between 1940 and 1942. And one of the most powerful conclusions that comes out of the book is that if humanity can find meaning even in the most challenging and difficult circumstances, then their capacity to overcome and be resilient becomes incredibly powerful. Upon entering the camp, Frankl experienced the stripping away of all his rights, all of his freedom, all of his privilege. Even his academic research was confiscated and taken away. His life's work seemingly destroyed in a moment. And yet, what stands out in the book is Viktor Frankl's incredible capacity and surprising capacity to express love and resilience. One of Viktor Frankl's observations for the reason behind his survival of the Holocaust was the fact that even in the midst of extreme suffering, he discovered and found meaning in that context. Even though Frankl's notebook full of all of his research as a professor of neurology was taken from him upon entering the camp, he decided that even though everything had changed, his core reason for being on the planet hadn't changed. And he said, it's imperative I survive to finish my work. Whilst in the camp, Frankl observed that discovering meaning had the power to create resilience, whilst meaninglessness, or coming to the conclusion that there's no reason to survive, actually was the cause of hopelessness and despair. Frankl observed that it wasn't necessarily just the lack of food or the lack of supplies or medicine that was killing people. It was the lack of meaning, that when people concluded that everything is meaningless, they then fell into hopelessness and into despair. Frankl observed that those who survived were often those who had a reason to survive. They were living for something bigger than themselves. They were living for the thought of making the world a better place. He observed that when people fell into despair and hopelessness and boredom and frustration and meaninglessness, that they ultimately fell into a feeling of being powerless, out of control. Another powerful discovery that Frankl made during his time in Nazi concentration camps was the power of selfless love, the power of loving well, the power of serving and sacrificing for others. Frankl notes that to love well is how you discover meaning in life. He says that when you lack meaning, and if you decide every morning who will you love and who will you elevate, you quickly find yourself living a meaningful life. And in particular, Frankl defines love as expressed in the desire to unlock other people's potential, to serve and elevate others. To love well is how you discover meaning. Another key to Viktor Frankl's surprising resilience in the midst of suffering and pain is his decision to suffer bravely. Frankl says that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning. It's like Frankl is experiencing the same pain, uncertainty, anxiety, lack as everyone else. But at the same time, he's turning it into an objective learning experience. So he's observing, he's seeing, he's witnessing, and he's stepping back and seeing the opportunities for discovery and growth in the midst of the pain. Frankl talks about an ability to transcend the moment, to look at it objectively, and to see what is being experienced as valuable. One of the most powerful conclusions that Viktor Frankl came to during his time in Nazi concentration camps was that everything can be taken from a man. Everything can be taken from a man, his status, his home, his power, his freedom. But one thing can never be taken from a person, and that is the capacity of a human being to choose their attitude in any and every situation. Viktor Frankl says that even in great suffering, there's always the freedom of choice, that all choices can be taken, but not the choice of how to respond to suffering, injustice, or difficulty. He says that even in a situation like a concentration camp, you can choose to behave like a swine, or you can choose to behave like a saint.